This is Maddox Schuler from Keymaster Games. You're listening to Master of One podcasts, and you can find us at campycreatures.com.
Welcome to the Sandbox episode of the Master of One podcast, part 2 for this week. This week we talk to artist and illustrator for the new Campy Creatures game, Josh Emrich. I'm Andrew, your Master of Art and Design.
I'm Patrick, your Master of Television and Film.
And I'm Luke, your Master of Toys and Games.
So channel your inner 50s horror film scream, because it's time to get terrified.
And take all the mortals.
So for our Sandbox episode this week, we are excited to talk to somebody who we've talked about on the show actually quite a bit, and we are doing it in a very special way. We are sitting in our hotel room.
Our mobile headquarters.
Well, live from
What part's mobile? Because this is a pretty stationary building.
No, we're mobile. That's the key.
we are collectively mobile. In Columbus, Georgia, we are at Creative South right now as we record this, and we're in our hotel room sitting down with Josh Emrich, who is an amazing artist, the guy behind all of the artwork from Campy Creatures, as well as among other things that are incredible. So we're going to sit and talk to him for the next few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Josh to the show.
All right. In person.
You're right here.
I'm here.
No, so here's the weird thing. We don't usually have guests right in front of us during an interview like this. It's all over. It's on the computer because we're all over the place.
I'm imagining how maybe intimidating it is to have 3 somewhat large guys in matching outfits, like all staring at you at the same time.
And I'm sitting in a low chair, so you guys are like
This is a total power
elevated.
move.
I feel like
Patrick towers over everyone,
I
so don't feel
we are
weird
not
about
big
that.
timing you right now.
Yeah,
wait,
we just
I
figured
can
total
fix this.
power play.
I'm waiting for the lights to go off and one big light to be over me right now. And
We just figured you'd be more
There we
comfortable.
go.
There you go. Now we're
Now
friends.
you guys are on the same level. I like that. So, Josh, tell everybody who you are and what you do. Give us the Wikipedia page about yourself.
So I'm kind of a Swiss Army knife of design and illustration.
Love it.
I work with a lot of what I call craft companies. I kind of get that from working with craft brewers, but I tend to work with a lot of small businesses that I become really passionate about their product and what they do, and I love it when my design can be a big part of like their success.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, so talk to us a little bit about what that means. So, what are some projects that you've worked on before that you're super proud of because your artwork is what caught people's eye and that's what drew them to whatever the product was?
Yeah, so I've worked with I don't know how many craft breweries now, but they've always been kind of open with me about like the growth that they've had after a rebrand project or when I've started working with them and like the results afterwards. So one of them that I've worked with grew from like 15,000 barrels to 300,000 barrels.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And so
That's a handful more.
Yeah, that's a little bit, but it makes me feel really good because it's one thing to get feedback from other designers and people who follow your work, but it feels really good to really help out a fellow entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Sort of live out their dream. And they've put money into it, they've put blood, sweat, and tears, and for design to come along and really kind of change that for them, it makes me feel really good about what I do.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the awards and those kinds of things are less important because one brewery will find out that you did that,
right?
And they've seen that growth, and so I haven't really had to look for work. It's just been one after another, like
being
that.
sought after at that point.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well, the work you do, I'm gonna do my best to describe it, and then you can correct me however you want to. The work that you do is has kind of a classic look to it. Not in the sense that it's like a necessarily retro, although some of your stuff with Campy Creatures specifically has some of that vibe. But it's classic in the sense that there's not like, you're not overdoing it. It seems like you have a restrained eye for design, because there's sometimes there can be so much going on that you kind of lose sight of what like the focal point is. Your work just seems clean. It seems very upfront, and there's not a ton that competing with each other. So what's the drive behind that? Or are you gonna say, I just totally, completely botched that description?
It's so interesting to hear other people talk about your work, because when I'm doing it, it's hard for me to notice what what a style is. I'm definitely drawn to retro things. I think I'm kind of come from the same cloth, and I look up to people like Charles S. Anderson, who's here at Creative South and speaking, and I was in love with all the same things, and I love pulling things from my past, from my grandparents' past, and kind of reconnecting to those things.
Sure.
But I always try to figure out a way to put a new or different spin on it. I don't want to just sort of replicate what they were doing. I want to use that as sort of a metaphor or a vehicle for kind of communicating what's current now. So it's kind of looking through the past as a lens to what's happening now. So I don't know, in terms of trying to keep things clean or not cluttered. I think that all comes from more of an illustration background.
Sure.
Because I blend design and illustration. With illustration, you're really searching for trying to create a dramatic moment. And some photographers do that too, where there can be a lot of stuff going on in a photograph, but really they use the photograph to really compose it down to one focal point or one clear message that you're trying to work around. And I know with a lot of the beer labels that I do, I want them to be like cereal boxes, that you sit there and study, while you're drinking it.
Yep.
And at the same, so I like to have things that can kind of divert you, but at the same time you keep coming back to that front label or whatever.
So when you're designing for beer specifically, how do you approach the design per beer? If you have something that's hop punch or something
it's hop punch.
Not a bad name.
Like
probably
a super
exists.
hoppy beer or
That's
something.
not a terrible name.
Is the beer type or the flavor, is that what you go off of? Is that part of it, or is it mostly the name, or kind of a combination of both?
Well, I'm really trying to embody what the intent of my client. So, there's some that definitely want to tie into a style or a movement within craft beer of flavors. But then other times it's more about the experience that we want people to have while having the beer.
Sure.
And that may not be tied to flavor.
Right.
It may be just a story that the brewery wants to tell, or that I enjoy telling.
Yeah.
So sometimes it kind of revolves around that. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis that way. But I think the main thing is always storytelling. You're always got to be telling a story, and that's what's great about craft beer, is that we can say things that big companies can't.
Right.
And so we get an opportunity to do things that are a little bit more weird and more interesting. We don't have to appeal to everybody. We can appeal to very, niche subcultures, that can be really fun. And I think that's the fun part of what I do. I mean, I wanted to be in film and be like an animator or something like that.
Sure.
And I get to, as opposed to doing it through film, I kind of do it through each project that I do.
Yeah.
And, when a brewery releases multiple beers in a series, I've tried to connect sometimes the stories between those
Little
beers.
threads between.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, currently, do you consider yourself freelancing, or it's you and your wife, or what's the organization?
Yeah, so this is probably going to be a longer answer to a
No,
short
fine,
question.
yeah.
But yeah, I had a design firm with, at the most, we had 6 people. It was called Tenfold. It was in Colorado. And it's been funny to talk to people this weekend, actually, that kind of remember Tenfold, because to me, I feel like it seems so long ago.
Sure.
But I worked had a design firm, and we kind of hit on the beer thing then.
Okay.
And eventually I broke off from that for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to sort of simplify my life. I had 4 kids. when I started the business, I had one kid, and I ended up with 4.
Yeah.
Because of the business?
Not because of the business. Yeah, that'd be some other kind of business.
I've been doing it wrong. I do not want to start a business.
Well, no, like I told my wife that when we got married that I didn't want to have kids until I was 30, and I had 3 and then 1 on the way by the time I turned 30. So it was,
So
2 of those were unexpected.
Okay.
And we know how that works.
Yeah.
But
Now.
now. So,
Beer.
but yeah, beer could be a factor. But yeah, so I needed to simplify, so I left the firm and kind of just focused on craft beer. And what it gave me an opportunity to do was, as opposed to working late at the firm, I could work late at home and have dinner with my family. I could take a 15-minute break and play with my kids, so that I still had a presence there. And when my wife would get stressed out, I could help her take a break, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And so that was a big change. But sort of in the evolution of that, I have worked more like a design firm than a freelancer. I've always done more of the brand strategy up front and really kind of worked more like a consultant for the long haul, as opposed to a freelancer that comes and goes and maybe only touches one little part of the brand.
Sure.
I really like doing things where I can do everything from strategy to production.
And it sounds like you're like really building the experience in a pretty specific area as well.
Yeah, so like it works great for craft beer because I can come up with some crazy concept and I can stick with it and make sure it's executed in a way that is really well done, and I create relationships with the canning companies and label printers, and so like everything that I do, I know how that's going to all turn out.
Right.
It's almost like you're art directing each piece of the process.
Yeah, it's like I'm kind of brand consultant. Yeah, every single hat that you could wear, and I like that. I know that some people get stressed out by that, but it gives me a lot of creative control, and my
definitely
clients
a lot
really
of quality
appreciate it.
control for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So here's something that I've noticed with you, and I want to kind of segue this into Campy Creatures, because that was our kind of foray into your work, and now I'm just enamored with it. But you have kind of become, at least the way that I see it, a kind of a brand ambassador. So rather than just someone hiring you to come do their logo for them or come do like an illustration for them, it seems like, based on what you just said and what I've seen the guys over at Keymaster Games with Campy Creatures especially, you have taken the illustration work that you were hired to do or whatever that they sought out to do, and you, at least in collaboration with them, have really brought that brand to life, and you've made it more of an immersive experience. And we talked to Maddox a little bit about this when he was on the show, about how a lot of people have Kickstarter games, right? So there's a lot of design, a lot of good or high designed games that are on Kickstarter. But so you can see those, and you can buy those, and you can pay $20 or $30 for that game, and that's great. But what you guys have done is you've got all these little add-ons with the beer labels and stuff that you guys are doing,
prints,
and the prints on top of that, and just all these different little elements that allows a person to not just play a game, but kind of bring the game to life.
Like a world.
Yeah, you get immersed into it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that really comes from a lot of game companies not understanding branding.
Yeah.
That if you're going to spend the time to create a little story, why do what Disney does, and they spin it off in every single direction you can think of. And I think that kind of comes from that. But part of that is like I just really enjoy when I pick a client to work with. I really enjoy getting in that with them. Yeah. And I think with the guys from Campy Creatures and Keymaster, they gave me a lot of trust, and I want to return that in the sense of like I'm proud of the work that I've done with them, so I want to keep that going. Like, how can we keep spinning this off into other things? And part of that too is our partnership agreement and how that kind of worked out. And so, for example, in this case, I've retained rights to the works outside of the board game industry as an opportunity for me to kind of launch some product, and it's kind of I haven't had an opportunity to do that or time to do it. 'Cause
Sure.
I have 4 kids at home, and I'm pretty hand to mouth when
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
comes to work. So I kind of have to keep moving through stuff. I don't really have an option to take some time off and work on my product or something like that.
And I want to talk about that at some point because the speed at which you work should be talked about. So, but keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, like I think it's also just the way that I like to think about things, and I love projects where I can just get so immersed and have tons of background story that maybe people don't even know. But I think. Or even pick up on, but I think overall they would feel that, hey, this feels really authentic. Yeah. And there's a lot of heart behind this, and that even comes down into the beer stuff too, where like the government information, like I even kern that stuff sometimes, you know. It's like I want everything to just feel like someone loved it, as opposed to, hey, we got to slap this stuff on there like big brands do. It's like they have this beautiful label and then they just slap government warning stuff on it. I think in the case of like the board games, you know, to me, it's like I'm writing my own little movie and putting on my own little play. And so it's really fun to kind of expand that out from there. So like the posters, the game really plays on classic horror movie monsters and creatures. Right. And so it was kind of easy to start like taking the game pieces and the characters from the game and start turning those into movie posters. And, you know, I have some other ideas down the line that I'd like to do in terms of other fun products, but off of Campy Creatures. But it gave me an opportunity to just keep going with it, and I was having so much fun I didn't want to stop. Yeah,
well, so you talk about kind of going hand to mouth, and that you just kind of have to keep going, and you can't. It's hard to stop because you have to go. But Luke and I have kickstarted, or we've backed the Kickstarter, and so we've been privy to like all the updates and stuff, and seeing the artwork coming through, and seeing how quickly this stuff gets turned around. So like we'll see concept stuff that Maddox will send out from on the update stuff, and then within like 2 days we're seeing like finished artwork and the card like laid out and everything. And I'm just sitting there going, how in the world do you churn out these? Would you consider these like 50s and 60s style?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there's some things that kind of have a root in the late 40s. Okay. I mean, because like, you know, you have sort of several eras of sorry to get geeky here.
Yeah,
but,
no.
Yeah, like several eras of sort of campy horror movies, and you know, you have the stuff in the like late 20s and 30s that really played into how the paranoia people were feeling about World War II, impending World War II, and the Nazis. You know, like the Black Cat is a great example. Like that was all about like. The Nazis coming to power and kind of the weird ideas that Americans thought they had, and so that you have this stuff starting to take off in the 30s, and then you have like in the 50s you kind of have more of the creature from the Black Lagoon, and then you start getting into like the Hammer films from England, you know, with Peter Cushing and all the people that ended up in Star Wars later. So you kind of have like these distinct areas. So it kind of the whole game sort of plays on those 3 eras. You know, and some of the monsters kind of play off those. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, but the research that goes into that, like how much, like especially when you're crafting the cards or the posters or whatever, how much research goes into that, and how much freedom do you have within a project like this to approach those things with like a stylistic approach, but then kind of put your own spin on it?
Yeah. So in sort of this. I feel like I've got to know all the cues to emote the right things, but I think part of that's just like the filter of you doing it as opposed to the people that were doing it then, to kind of add your own spin on it. And it's not like I'm intentionally doing it, but you know, I don't want to just I don't want to 100% recreate what was done in the past, and there's certain things about the game that, you know, utility-wise, you have to do it in a certain way so it'll work as a game, as opposed to an old poster or whatever. But I almost want to make it like those things were with how they were when they were brand new, and how they may have felt when they were new to those people, as opposed to trying to create something that looks old. And so that's kind of, I guess that's the way that I try to view it. Yeah. To kind of
I think that
It
translates.
seems like you already like loved all these films, or loved all these, or is this purely from research? Like all this, you just dropped all this information.
Yeah, you just
about-
dropped some geek knowledge.
Well, I was aware of it, but I don't think I do get that immersed in stuff. Like I'm like my wife talks about this, and I have 2 kids that are like this too, and she says they totally take after you. But like I will just get so obsessed with one thing, and it's like all I consume, and then eventually I'm done with that. But I retain all that, and it's weird. And when I had Tenfold, the employees would make fun of me because they would say like Josh is like this walking like encyclopedia of weird facts. Like random facts. You'll just be talking and like I'll throw some weird fact in and they're like, there's Josh with his like random fact in there. But like I just love learning. And while I was working on Campy Creatures, I would have like The Mummy playing while I'm working, just to have that vibe. And I went
osmosis. You're just hoping that the inspiration just kind of soaks through and just goes.
Totally. And I would have I went out and bought. There's a John. I think it's written by John Landis or something like that. There's a monster movie book, and it just goes through every single monster in film, and like I went through that to just kind of know what the archetypes were, and you kind of even go back and play off of some of the things that some of the monster creatures were very like sort of racially charged, like King Kong or whatever, and you don't want to delve into territory that's just not going to play well now.
Sure.
So yeah.
I mean, is that okay? So, I mean, I imagine your goal is just to only promote and enhance the game. So, like, with any of your artwork, are you trying to delve into any of those other pieces, or are you having to purposely weed that stuff out?
I mean, I weed it out for the game, but like as we're doing art posters that we've kind of released along with the game, some of the movie type kind of sort of plays on some of those issues. Like I hope people are smart enough to know that we're sort of trying to point those things out as opposed to reinforce those ideas.
Right, you're not backing that stuff up. You are just saying you're satiring it. Like you're saying this is what this was about.
Right. Yeah. So like the Mummy had we tried to create creatures that were gender balanced. Because like I have daughters and I want them to play the game. I want them to feel like there's characters in them for the game. So like the vampire is a female character, and my 6-year-old daughter loves the vampire. That's her favorite.
Yeah,
and probably because it's based on her mom. I had her mom, my wife posed for the vampire.
Probably better that way than the beast.
Yeah. I'm sure she'll thank me for that one. But yeah,
the mummy would have made more sense, mummy, but that's fine.
Yeah, we also did the mummy as a female, and
is that based after your mom?
No. But like we kind of played on, some things about like some puns like on the posters and stuff that could just kind of play off of some of the topics. A lot of horror films deal with the subject of rape, and like how do you sort of weave in? It's hard to not avoid those connotations, you know. But but how can you kind of like make people aware of that? You know? Like think of I've always been an introspective person, so like every movie that I'm watching, I'm asking, what does this mean? I have a hard time to sit back and I enjoy it by internalizing what are they trying to say, what are they meaning, and so like I want people to be aware of, like I want people to be able to go as deep as I'm going and provide those breadcrumbs for them, just so if there's someone that really wants to go that deep, they can. Or it just looks good, and I can stop here.
It's like the end of the.
It works on 2 levels there.
Right.
But at the same time, I imagine that's a difficult balance to strike, especially doing the poster work, where you're not glorifying, but you're also not. Especially when you're talking about something as like serious as rape, you also don't want to be like too funny with it.
Right.
Like, you don't want to be flippant with it, but you also don't want to be like, hey, this is okay to do. So that's. But then do all of that stuff under the context of this is artwork based out of a card game,
right?
You know what I mean? Say from like a broader perspective, it is interesting to me how much like serious thought goes into all these pieces, right? And I think that much like probably the average person, I just see like that's a pretty picture, and that's like maybe the extent of like my level of thought. So it's interesting to see that even in something that is it's a card game and it's not your own, that there's still like that level of thought even in the whether that translates to layout or to the finished design or whatever. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So just a little bit, we're going to shift into our final questions here in a second, but before we do that, what's your background in terms of training? Like, how long have you been doing like the design, digital design, and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So I've, I graduated in 2002 with a degree in visual communication design from a small little school called the University of Indianapolis. I learned a lot through internships. And I've always been someone who has sought to be well-rounded.
Yeah.
Like I embrace any experience that I can have. I'm definitely not a person that I'll try anything.
Yeah.
But like I think in terms of learning and sort of gaining experience, when I went to school, I wanted to be well-rounded in not only in art but other things. So I took anthropology classes. I took, if I wanted to do figure drawing, I was going to take biology classes. So
Sure.
I always liked the idea that Renaissance guys had, and that they could do things beyond just that. And I think part of that comes from I grew up in a family of engineers, and it's like that was a way for me to help justify art. Is that hey, I have all these other options too that I could maybe go out and do.
Well,
but
you have foundations too, then.
Yeah.
Based on
So that's kind of a little bit of the pedigree of kind of where I'm coming from. So like I did fine art painting classes in art school, and yeah, I mean I always sought to, and it helps me relate to my clients a lot better too.
Oh,
that I can step out there and kind of learn enough about what they do that I can speak their language and kind of bridge those communication gaps. But and I grew up in a pretty blue collar family. Nobody was an artist. I was the first artist. So, and nobody understood what I was doing, but they supported it. And, but I got used to explaining what the heck I'm doing to my parents. When I was in college, I did a lot of abstract art, and they just thought, when I was young, they were like, I hope you never do abstract art. And here I am doing it. But then, I could explain it to them, and it's like, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, they could actually see, okay, that's good abstract art versus bad abstract art or whatever. Sure. So, yeah.
I think that's so fascinating when I think about, you said a thing about being able to relate to your clients or being able to, I think the idea of you being a self-inflicted learner or a self-propelled learner, whatever you want to say. You wanting to learn the most you can to bring your best foot forward to a project. Not every designer is like that. And so many designers want to just say, here is my perspective on things. You're hiring me for my perspective, and I'm just going to create something based on me, as opposed to wanting to learn the most about you, what like you talked about the beer earlier, about what the client is. Sometimes it's based on the name of the beer. Sometimes it's based on the flavor of the beer or whatever. But sometimes it's just based on what they're trying to accomplish. Taking time to figure that out is not something that we should take for granted, because not every designer goes out to do that. And I see it's really intentional.
I think it's a sign of maturity, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel very mature right now. Sitting in an armchair.
Yeah.
Got my smoking jacket on.
I don't think you're supposed to have that pipe in here, though.
We're gonna lose our deposit. Yeah. But no, we all work with creatives. We have jobs in creative fields, and we deal with them either through other vendors or other companies, and then we talk to a lot of creatives. And I think the more we deal with, when we talk to more experienced people that have spent more time in the industry or worked at a higher level, it seems more common that you do get the response of it's less me and more them in speaking about a client. And it seems like the less experienced people, and this is a generalization, but stay with me, it just seems like it tends to be a bit more of like, I have this compulsion to have,
my art in the world
everywhere I can, to the point that it becomes like I lock heads with a client. I'm pushing for me, and it's cool to see that diminish And so I see it as a sign of maturity personally, because I think that, I personally love the viewpoint. I like that idea of being able to say that, yes, I need to have fulfillment. Yes, I need to do a good job, and yes, I need to feel like I really brought my A game. But at the same time, part of doing a great job is the client winning, the client feeling like I got what I wanted.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, I've had discussions too with clients where I've said, between the two of us, people hire me for my taste.
Yeah.
You don't get hired for your taste, so we're going to go with what I want to do.
Sure.
So there's definitely been discussions like that.
But is that based out of narcissism, or is it based out of trying to do what's best for the client?
I try to do what's best for the client, but sometimes too, I don't want them to junk up what I'm doing.
Sure.
And or not. A lot of times, for them, it's coming from a place of fear. They don't understand it. They may not understand it. And I've tried to take them as far as I can. And at a certain point, they're just going to have to let go. And usually that's when I have that discussion, is when they just need to let go, trust that I'm doing this. And, and I explain to my clients, when I take on a client, like I'm a one-man show. So you're taking a big chunk of my time. I can't get that time back.
Right.
And I don't spend a lot of time. I don't do awards, get in awards things, and I don't really actively promote myself a lot.
Okay.
So for me, it's like, I just know that if I do a good job with a client, that's going to lead to more work every single time.
Yeah.
And so I tell my clients, I'm betting on you like you're betting on me.
Right.
So I'm willing to, if this fails, share the numbers with me and let me know, and I'll make it right.
Well, I think what I said more simply. And I think it is obvious in practice and maybe not obvious in description. And this is what I would challenge people to do. Whether you're executing to a T what you were asked, or whether you're pushing back, if that is done under the umbrella of I am doing the best for you, then I think you can handle those situations appropriately. I think it is obvious, even if it's obvious for some intangible X factor reason, I think it is obvious when someone pushes back for the sake of what is best for me, the artist, as opposed to what is the best for you, the client. So.
Yeah, and even sometimes we have our selfish things, but I think sometimes we can find ways that and explain to the client why that's in their benefit.
Yeah.
I love work. I mean, I know that there's some people that say the clients are the worst part of the job, but as I've gotten older and you've formed long-term relationships with clients, like I've had clients come to me with the best ideas, way better than I've had, and you've got to be humble enough to get on that gravy train, because they're going to get credit for it too.
Right.
So I think part of that is, and I think and I've heard similar things too, like as I've experienced designers that are my heroes, when you hear them talk about it in these humble terms of, sometimes we got to get over ourselves in order to do the right kind of design, the best design, and I think, especially when it comes to simplicity, I think this is the thing that I struggle with sometimes is sometimes I want to show off a little bit of virtuosity in the things that I do, like making something that I know that other designers may not be able to make very easily, and they want to know how I did it. But sometimes that can get in the way of a good concept,
sure,
and a simple concept
Muddies the water a bit.
Muddies the water a bit.
I think a good word to describe at least what I'm viewing from you is not that you're picking up clients. You're working with partners.
Exactly.
You're asking to come alongside these companies and contribute, not just execute project A, B, and C. You're coming alongside as a partner, maybe not a financial partner. Maybe you're not coming on as like a percentage partner, but you're coming alongside.
But maybe.
But potentially, I don't want to rule that out. But you're coming alongside to say, hey, I'm in this with you. Let's work through this to get the best outcome for both of us. And that comes through because you've got, for the purposes of this, Campy Creatures promoting the crap out of your stuff, and you promoting the crap out of their stuff.
Exactly.
And you guys are together. I mean, I could look at this and not know you weren't part of Keymaster Games if I didn't know better.
Sure.
And I think that's a good marriage. That means there's a good relationship there.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would caution younger designers. you've got to get some experience under your belt before you find the right people that you want to partner with.
Yeah.
Because for me, it took a while to really kind of zero in on craft breweries and then start defining the types of people that I really love working with, that I get along best with, that we get each other. And I think, it takes a little bit of working with different types of peoples to really just discover like who you are made to work with.
Yeah.
So I think, one of the things that has reconfirmed this for me, and this is something that, like, when I do talks, I talk about with other designers and stuff, is that I've had experiences where I've worked with a huge company. I was helping to rebrand a huge brand, and it was like I was doing an illustration that was basically the face of this brand.
Yeah.
And we went through several testing phases, and it was a real monotonous process. But the people on the other one were very encouraging, but I didn't really have any access to the client, the real client, the end client.
Right.
And I was getting paid pretty well, but at the end of the day, like, we had gone through several iterations, they've gone through several testing. They said, yours is going to be the final. People are loving it. We're going to do one round of testing. You'll hear back in 2 weeks. And I didn't hear back for 4. And so I finally called them up, and they said, oh, yeah, the project was canceled. So nobody even bothered to, call me up and say, hey, we've got some really bad news. We told you that and this would have been something that was gonna, I felt like at the time, man, this is gonna be my big break in terms of projects and stuff. And then to juxtapose that, so that I had that experience, where when you're working for the dream clients that people talk about in talks and when they're showing off their work,
like Golden Corral.
Well,
Brian's.
Well, the Targets or the Nikes of the world. And
Right.
I'm sure people probably have better experience. This is not one of those.
Those are
companies.
not the ones.
Those are not
Yeah.
the ones. But then my Bottle Logic client in Anaheim, we've had a great relationship. When I was recently moving to Indianapolis, our house was delayed for 6 months. And then at the end of the deal, the day that we were driving to close, our mortgage company called and said, hey, we've got a problem. And then we spent a week trying to, at the point of being, ready to walk away from the house that we were buying.
Yeah.
We had just moved from Colorado to Indiana to be closer to family. And at that point, I was ready to reevaluate everything. Was talking to Bottle Logic, and they were asking me how I was doing. I was like, yeah, well, things just potentially fell through on our house, and I don't want to pony up any more money. And they were like, well, how much do you need? And that's the difference that you can have by working with a small company. And they have recognized over time that I've been solving the same high level problems for a small company and doing the same, putting all the same effort and passion and intelligence and creativity in that work. It's no different than the work I was doing. It's just I found someone that appreciates that.
Yeah.
And that I feel like that's so much more important than working with big names or something like that. So
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into my final question, but I did want to say, as a side note, it's kind of obvious when you're trying to hone in on what you do. It's really obvious to look at it from a standpoint of style. Of I only want to work with clients, give me projects that want to be this look and feel. I don't know that I'd ever really considered only looking for clients that are in a specific genre. Specifically you're with craft breweries. So I think that's very interesting. But it also gives you the opportunity to again, you're to a point now that some young gun can't really come and compete with the level of knowledge you built of the industry overall, just because you've been working with so many of the same client, which I think is a really cool thing. Anyway, so side note. So I'm curious, earlier we made the comment, we were talking about the things you've done with Campy Creatures. We were contrasting that against maybe other board games. And just the idea that I use the idea of maybe more of a world, but the point is we have posters and we have the craft beers, and then we also have the game, and then, everything's amazing. And you made the comment about they don't necessarily understand marketing, and I'm curious from your perspective, maybe what are some of the most obvious misses? Like, what are some of the places people most consistently miss when they are promoting something, or when they, I guess when they're not promoting something well? Like, what are the easy steps they can maybe take, or at least consider to do a better job in managing that?
Well, I think like in the board game thing, it's real easy when you're looking at all the games on Kickstarter. You start to notice a similar look, and I think sometimes when you have any kind of industry that becomes a sounding chamber for itself, that when a game like Campy Creatures looks so different maybe in that industry, it really catches people's eye because the pedigree of Campy Creatures, is so different from other board games. I mean, it's created by two guys who are actual designers and understand like look and genre and like how we could build that. And I think in some degree that can be true of things like Dribble. There's a certain look and an echo chamber that happens there. Yeah. And then somebody that has a really different look or maybe even comes from a different background than everyone else that's on there. Maybe it's someone who does concept art or concept art illustration. They start posting that in Dribble, and all of a sudden, like everyone loves it because it looks so different in that.
It's arena. Like it's refreshing, or it's just
it's a unicorn.
Eye-catching.
We had this conversation about artists and what they wore or what they wear.
Yeah.
Like we talked at lunch about. We were talking to Bethany Heckhouse and in EFIS League, and she was saying that she was standing in line, like waiting to get in the building today. And she said 5 people were like wearing the same jean jacket she was wearing and like shoes.
The same hats and the same glasses, and that all these people are probably individuals wherever they're from, but when they all come together,
they're the exact same person.
The individualism goes away. It becomes a sea of the same. And so I think that's right. If there's a sea of the same, the Where's Waldo will show up and it'll stand out in the crowd.
Right. Well, and I think it's easier to build a story like that feels so immersive. And I think part of that came out of a utility for Campy Creatures. Like we wanted to promote the heck out of it. So it's like how many board games have a beer attached to it that's on Kickstarter?
Yeah, right.
So, and the story behind that was that I had Bottle Logic working in what Bottle Logic is into is very similar to what the Campy Creatures game is kind of all about, just from little bit different genres, but the Campy Creatures art worked perfect for Bottle Logic. So I showed them the art, and they wanted to do a tart ale series. And so like, well, why don't we just do this co-branded thing? And that could be really cool. And then, board game players love beer.
Right.
Yeah, they're drinking anyway.
Yeah. So why not have like the first, board game that has its own beer,
Yeah.
So
have you ever heard of the podcast or the YouTube show, Beer and Board Games?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like this is gonna go well with them.
I hope so.
This will be pretty good.
The hard part is like the Bottle Logic beers are so hard to get a hold of. Like, that was the one frustration I think people have with it is that like they want to get a hold of it, but like Bottle Logic beers are already hard to get a hold of. So but I hope some people can luck out and get their hands on it.
Well, you brought us all a case, so thank you.
Yeah, we've been drinking it since 9 a.m. and I feel fine.
Yeah, there's some people that are gonna rob your hotel room.
We'll be long gone by the time they hear this.
It's actually fermenting right now, and I get updates. Like the Bottle Logic guys text me like,
cool.
Hey, here's what's going on with it, or it's tasting good, or we want to make these tweaks, which is kind of fun that like they want to update me on their craft too, like in the same way that I want to. So they will. Yeah,
you're the middle person. You're connecting these two worlds because you've partnered with both of them, and you're like expanding this.
When you
team.
show you care, you know, if you show your client that you care about what they do, like that makes them feel good, and then they're gonna buy into you, and that's Patrick called it maturity. It's a sign of maturity. I call it a sign of success. Mm-hmm. Like you're successful in that. When people like working with you, they just keep working with you.
Right.
But it elevates your value.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been having this conversation lately with. I'm sure we do that. We fixate on a topic like in our personal lives, and I've been having this conversation about being the most technically proficient is. That's not the delineator for success. There are incredible artists that will just sit in their living room and work on their computer and nobody will ever see their stuff because they don't have, it's either the relational skills or they don't know how to put themselves out there or they don't promote themselves well or, whatever.
Or they don't know how everything works together.
Yeah, exactly. Like they have a couple pieces. So obviously your art's amazing. There are people that can do just as well as you when it comes to like executing the art.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
But the way you partner with people, the way you like bring it all together and like go the extra step and like that's the reason that you're set apart. That's the reason you have security, and that's the reason that you get to work with all these companies, and you don't have to seek them out.
Well, I think that like there's designers that, depending upon where there's people that need to get skill and want to get skill, and then like I think the hard part though is the people that have skill sometimes don't really recognize that they need the other skills.
Right.
The non-design
You can't just
skills.
stop at that point.
Yeah, you can't just stop at that point and say I've made it, and why can't I just like people? And I think as artists, like we're visual communicators, so we just we want to put it out there and people just like it. Like I should just show this to you, but how you present it and how you talk people through it, I mean, that makes all the difference whether they're going to buy it or not.
Yeah.
And like when I'm talking to students or whatever, and even in our own firm, when I had Tenfold when we do a presentation, I want you to have a reason for everything you do. Like I don't want you to sit, like if someone asks you, why did you do this? I don't want to hear that I love this color or this is on trend. Like I want, tell me a communication reason why this exists and why are we doing it this way. And then in other ways too, you've got to really, push those things. And like, there's even better reasons. Like how can you get better at that? And that, for me, that came from trying to explain what I'm doing to my engineer parents and
That's
stuff.
exactly what I was thinking. Like you were born and raised into this kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
Right.
Explaining why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things that like I'd like to take on more mentorship things, and I think I enjoy like teaching designers that I've worked with or collaborated with how to be a nice guy, how to be a nice person in business too, not just be a great designer.
Yeah.
Because you know what, people, chances are many of us aren't going to reach a level of fame or anything that people will remember us later.
Sure.
It's like, my legacy is going to be defined by my clients more so than, I'm not going to be in museums. I don't really have that goal, but like, I know that my clients, that's going to be my legacy for them. And then, maybe someday they'll share that with my kids when they're old enough. And, I have 2 kids that are super into art. So I'm hoping that they take up the family business. Like I want to go old school where they, come alongside
like
and then Emrich office
Von
can just
Glitschka.
stay Emrich office.
Yeah, last year I think Von Glitschka hired his daughter last year. She's been working with him for a year now, and I think that's a cool way to do that.
That's awesome. Like I hope my daughters I have a daughter that's really good at art. All my kids are pretty good at art, but I have 2 in particular that like just are way better than I was at their age.
Yeah.
And like I see some of the same traits, and it's like I don't want to I try not to push them in design or art. Like if I'm sitting down and drawing something and they really like it, I'll explain why why it's good. Like why you're liking this, or they'll ask me how I did something, but I don't want to ever, unless they want my critique, I don't critique.
Yeah, sure.
So
absolutely. So I'll ask my final question, and I'll let Luke kind of take his.
Luke tends to ask better final questions.
Yeah,
that's the reason we save him. For the
He's
end.
the closer
That's not
for
true.
sure.
That's not true.
He's the ringer. You said something that is interesting to me, and I think it would be interesting for people. We have people in our Slack channel who, and just in our community in general, like the podcast community, who are incredible illustrators and are now kind of taking this turn and this shift into being interested in doing game design and seeing not necessarily creating the game, but creating the artwork for the game. 2 questions. Do you see this as kind of being a newer trend, a newer outlet in the design community, or do you feel like it's always been there and it's just kind of emerging into a new format? And then 2, what would you tell people who are in that community who want to be doing what you're doing? What should they be doing right now to get in that field?
I think if you love board games, start coming up with your own. I mean, that that would be a win-win if you're a designer and can. I mean, that's basically what Kyle Key and Maddox Schuler have done with Keymaster Games. Is their first game, Control, they both did that themselves. But then I think Campy Creatures came along, and that was one where they couldn't do it on their own or didn't want to, and they could just find someone whose style would fit with that. So I guess you could reach out with Keymaster Games as one good place to start. But I think a couple things that I've learned about the industry, just even talking with Kyle and Maddox, is that artists don't really get paid very well in that industry.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not something that's super valued. But if you could find someone and show how the artwork totally took that game from something that wasn't going to get noticed or marginally noticed to something that really put them on the map, And I think in the case of what happened with Keymaster Games is I'm not getting paid what I would normally get paid to do a beverage product.
Sure.
Usually I'm getting a buyout and that kind of thing. But in this case, I'm helping co-promote the game. It's taking me into a new world. But I'm hoping that other game creators are going to see what we've done with Campy Creatures and maybe want me to do the next game.
Right.
Sure.
So and that's how it happened with craft beer for me. It was I did one good project. I invested a little bit in it. I didn't get paid what I wanted to get paid, but at the same time, though, they let me innovate and do something really cool that was different, and then each one came after that.
The dividends have exceeded your initial investment.
Yeah, and then, but if you're going to give people a break, make sure that they know the true cost of things.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake that I made at one point. But I think, with Campy Creatures, the next board game company that comes along, I can tell them, this is what it would cost to do something like Campy Creatures, and hopefully we can rise change those expectations.
Yeah,
sure.
Especially the games on Kickstarter, they're not paying much I don't think for the art, and even there's some great art out there too. I mean, it's still really good stuff, but like anything, it can be commoditized. And I know there's a lot of people that are taking their stuff overseas and having it done overseas at a much lower rate. And but as a designer, as an illustrator who understands communication challenges, if you could take their stuff to a whole other level, to a whole other experience where you actually learn all the ins and outs of how board games are produced or the production stuff, then you become a resource for those companies and you help save them money. So if it's a first-time company but they have money behind them but don't necessarily know how to produce a game, then that gives you an opportunity to charge a better rate than someone who's just, you've got to do a little bit more work, you got to do a little bit more homework, but you get an opportunity to break off in that area and do something totally fun.
Yeah, that's really practical advice.
Okay, so my final question is actually we've gotten pretty deep in this whole interview. So mine's it's really good. It's a lot of really good information. I think a lot of people are going to be listening again to catch things that they'll probably miss because there's a lot
What's
of
your favorite
really
color?
good stuff. No. This one's pretty easy. So you have craft beer kind of on lockdown. You're getting into board games. Is there another avenue that you're like, man, I really think I could kill city safety design or something? That's just an example, but something another kind of category.
Man, I was kind of really wanting to just, lock down the amount of craft beer that I took on, and then Campy Creatures came along, and I, had no idea that I wanted to get into that.
Sure.
So for me, it's not necessarily. There's a few things that I have my eye on, but I'm not committed to anything right now that I feel okay, this is the next place that I want to go with that.
Sure.
But I'm just keeping my eyes open for what that opportunity is. And I think that's what Campy Creatures was. That's how beer came along. I never thought in a million years that I'd be doing craft beer. I knew nothing about beer when I started doing craft beer, but I had a first-rate education through it,
Yep.
But I think, like a lot of designers, I would like to figure out ways to crack the passive income code. But you see what people have done, and you see how they've achieved a certain amount of success. But I don't want to just do, stickers, pins, T-shirts, that kind of stuff. How could I create a product where like board games, where you could create a completely innovative thing because you understand design, in ways that other like board game mechanics creators wouldn't understand.
Sure.
That you could go into an industry and really change and be disruptive or something like that. I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
I have some
Small
ideas.
exotic pet stores.
Well, so my wife she works with me, and our kids are off to school now, and so she's finally getting back into doing design, hopefully with me, and
cool.
So taking on more of that as opposed to just being a sounding board and that kind of thing. But so she's really good at understanding interior decor and those kind of things. So like, what might that look like? Is there a way that I could be as immersive and crazy about creating some type of home decor thing?
Sure.
That's
a story of a room or something. Yeah.
Or even like connecting some of all of the dots that you have and doing like storefronts or something.
Yeah.
Working on something like that.
You know what? I think it would be really fun to do like old school. Like I'm super envious. I think you work in the computer all the time, and it's really nice to create something physical. And I think that might be a hallmark of things that I like love to work on, is where my work is a part of the product, like a beer label or a game, but like working on like a Windows storefront, like an experience that people walk by, and it's a physical thing. I've been actually collecting storefronts, so it's weird. Like I'm sort of starting to synthesize as we're talking. That would be kind of a cool thing. But like, I mean, and I'm super into like Imagineer people and stuff. I can follow all that stuff as well. But like, that could be kind of a cool thing. And I've also explored things just like, why not uniting some similar interests and not doing something where I'm actually doing any design, but like, why not open up like a pinball craft beer store, where you have like things like that. I mean, I don't know. So
we just talked to recently. We talked to Mel McGowan, who was a former Disney Imagineer who worked on the reconstruction of downtown Disney in Anaheim, and then actually headed up the Disney California Adventure Project. And the way that he calls it, he's now the chief creative officer of Plain Joe Studios, and he defines that as spatial storytelling. And I think it sounds like that is right up your alley, given, especially if you're going to be partnering with your wife in that. It seems like that's right up your alley.
Especially after talking to Mel. Y'all have a lot of the same traits.
You do.
The way you approach people, the things that get you excited, all that kind of stuff.
We should connect you two.
Yes.
He's the guy to know.
Call me up.
Yeah. So thanks for chatting with us. Tell everybody where they can find you, they can find your work, they can support what you're doing.
Yeah, so my website is Emrich, EMRICH.co. And then my Twitter handle and Instagram handle and Dribble handle is @EmrichOffice.
Okay.
So they're pretty easy.
Any projects coming up on the horizon besides Campy Creatures that we need to be looking out for?
After I said I wasn't taking on any more breweries, I'm getting ready to work on a new brewery. And
you lied to us.
Yeah, I totally lied. Actually, no.
This whole thing is built on a lie.
Yeah. Well, I had one client that actually shut down, and it wasn't anything that the work did. It was they kind of expanded too fast, so it created an open slot. Sure. And there was a company that has been trying to work with me for a little while now, and like I kept telling them, I can't take anything on, take anything out. And it's really nice when you have those people that pursue you. So after a while, you're kind of like, playing coy, and
sure.
That wasn't what I was trying to do, but it's kind of.
It was
nice
legitimate before, and now you're like, you know what? You've stuck around, and a slot has opened up, and I'm gonna.
That's how I met Mackenzie, my wife.
Yeah,
very similar story.
He wore her down.
I think that's the best many of us can hope for. Is like just be persistent.
Yeah,
that's amazing. All right, so I've got these tokens. And we typically do this over the computer, and we just tell you to pick number 1 through 3. But here's the deal. We're going to have you draw these for real. I'm going to hand them over to you here in a second, and you'll be able to pick these tokens to get our categories for us. Is that cool?
Yep.
Cool. So up next, we're going to draw some tokens. So every week we do the tokens portion, which is when we figure out the categories that we're going to talk about the next week on our master category show. And since Josh is sitting in our hotel room right now, just inches away from where Luke gets naked and gets into bed.
Nope. Nope.
He sleeps just like that.
This is how I sleep.
This got really uncomfortable really
Yeah.
fast.
You think it's uncomfortable for you? I sleep right there. He's going to draw tokens. So he's got our tokens. They're face down right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and let him choose who gets what. So tell us who that goes to.
All right, so this is toys and games, and I get to choose who.
You
Yeah.
get, you get
Yeah.
to choose. This is all
Anyone.
you.
I'm-
Patrick
Yeah.
gets toys and games.
Patrick.
Congratulations.
Nice.
All right, so go ahead and divvy out the other two. This is a totally different way of us doing this. I love it.
All right, so this is art and design.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give this one to you.
Who feels
All
right for that? Yeah,
all
yeah, that's
right,
right. I do.
all right.
That means that I've got art and design. That means Luke gets TV and
TV
film.
and film.
You
Thank
did
you,
great.
Josh.
That was fun. Josh, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's been a
This is
long
a very long day, so thank you.
But you did great. I can't wait to listen back to this interview and hear all the things that I missed because my brain is mush right now. But thank you for doing this. You can find us on mof1podcast.com where you can find show notes and links to all the stuff that we talked about in this episode, as well as an archive of a ton of other incredible artists, including Maddox from Keymaster Games, where we talk all about campy
We mentioned
creatures.
Mel McGowan. We mentioned Bethany Heck.
Yeah, there's lots of people we mentioned in this episode. Go to the archive and find those episodes. If you want to know more about the actual mechanic of campy creatures, we spend a lot of time about that in Maddox's episode. And then while you're there, you can go to our Slack channel. Just go to mof1podcast.com/Slack to join the community there. We talk every day with, oh my gosh, almost 200 creatives now at this point in that community. And it's
Turn off
encouraging.
notifications.
Yeah, it's encouraging. It's fun. There's always something new and noteworthy to catch inside that community. So join that in there, and then find us on iTunes.
iTunes,
When
you
you
can
do that-
subscribe, rate, review, and when you leave a review, it does a lot of good for us.
Yep.
And then
We'll read
it
it.
on air.
Yeah.
Whatever you say. We have one in the.
One in the chamber.
But
One in
that's
the
like as
chamber.
long as a book, so it's gonna be a minute.
It's gonna be a minute before we get to it.
And there's voices. It's like a 3-act play. So
Yeah, we gotta rehearse.
We're gonna hire like a stage crew to come in and help us
it's
with that
gonna be
one.
good.
So go do that. There's all sorts of different ways to connect with
Patreon.
us. Patreon, you can support the show if you like what you're hearing. For as little as $1, you can become a patron. For as little as $5, you can get the blooper episodes.
That's
and there's stuff
And
as
for
you go.
as much as 1,000, you can be our best friends.
If you get on a Patreon tier at $1,000, we will fly out
and
get-
fire Luke.
We'll do whatever. So just go to patreon.com/mof1podcast. You can find us on M of One Podcast on all the different socials as well. And you can find us on there. But I think for now, we're going to stop talking after a very long day of talking. So we'll send this out here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Josh.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butts.
Use the force.
So channel your inner 50s horror film scream, because it's time to get terrified.
Take all the humans. Is it humans or mortals?
Mortals.
All right. Hold on one second. And take all the mortals. Thanks.
And take all the morticians. Then take all the portals.
And close all the portals. Wait, what game is this?